Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today and welcome to the fourth webinar in the Keeping It Real series. Today I, Anna Richards, will be moderating and I'm joined by Mark Larkin, CEO and founder of Vitaccess, Sam Llewellyn, Senior Consultant at Vitaccess, and our special guest, I like to think of her as the goddess of compliance herself, Esther Daemen. Senior Thanks, David. Senior Clinical Research, Quality, Regulatory and GDPR Consultant. So we're going to take you through how you can create longitudinal pre to post approval disease-based real-world evidence studies by incorporating safety reporting once a product receives registrational approval. So if Mark, you take us to the overview slide. You'll see how we'll take you through the importance of real-world evidence and safety reporting, and then how to incorporate this and deployment of safety reporting modules. This will then be followed by a Q&A session at the end, where you can put forward your questions to the panelists. So if you have any questions, please feel free to add them at any point during the webinar. There's a question section where you can send that over to us at any point, and we'll go through that. So to begin, I'll give you a bit of a background on Vitaccess itself. So if move on to the next slide, we are an innovative research organisation, and you can see here we've got 4 complementary core capabilities: real-world evidence, consulting, which is HUR and patient-centred outcomes, localization and analytics. This allows us to give this collaborative approach to global digital research. So from concept to implementation, we help generate real-world data and insights through our patient-centric solutions. So if I take you over to the next slide, you can see how the Vitaccess Real platform looks like. And here you have Vitaccess Real, which is the real-world evidence platform, which allows for data capture from patients, caregivers, and clinicians. And then you have on the right-hand side the real-time research portal, which allows you to see this data as it is collected. So if we move on to the next part, the Vitaccess Real platform is a modular design, allows for tailoring and quick, rapid launch as well. So you can see there's elements such as e-consent, ECRFs, electronic patient reported outcomes, things such as rewards, wearables, bespoke data that can be added and incorporated into this data capture. We're going to focus today on safety reporting. That's why it's highlighted just down there. So I'll move over to Sam now, who will tell you a bit more about the importance of real-world evidence and safety reporting.
Thank you very much, Anna. So yeah, I won't spend too long going into this because we want to get to the good part. We want to get to the safety reporting part. But just to give some context, I guess, to the discussion, we're sort of, focusing on real-world evidence, and just what we've got up on the screen here is just sort of to separate out, the importance of real-world evidence pre and post-launch a project. So, pre-launch, typically, in our experience of working on these real-world evidence studies here at Vitaccess, typical research questions might be looking at the burden of illness, current treatment patterns, and we've highlighted there, that a pre-launch study might look at the effectiveness, safety, and cost of current therapies. And this, the idea with these pre-launch real-world evidence study is to generate the necessary evidence for reimbursement submissions. And then just what you'll see on the other side of the screen, sorry, is a sort of post-launch importance of real-world evidence studies. So, this is to extend the value position. What we're going to come on to then is this, safety reporting, the bit that we've highlighted there. But, other use cases of real-world evidence studies post-launch could be, again, sort of looking at cost of therapy and comparing the effectiveness against other products on the market. And we've just got a line there at the bottom then, which is sort of more context to what we're going to come on to, and we're going to sort of give an example of a safety reporting module within our real platform. But just to say, that digital platforms do allow for us to set up this, safety reporting at product launch. And then if we could just go on to the next slide, please. So again, I'm not going to go through all of this, but it's just a nice, some people on the webinar may have seen this diagram before. EMA, Adaptive Pathways Workshop. Sorry, I was forgetting where that one was from. But yeah, just to sort of show where, compared to previously, now the sheer amount of evidence that is being required. And again, just to give some context to where safety reporting can fit within this as part of the larger real-world evidence studies. Okay, thank you, Anna. I think, it was over to Esther.
Yes, thank you, Sam. So yeah, in view of what Anna and Sam already presented, we go now to the actual reason why we're in this webinar today. It's all talking about post-marketing surveillance. So yeah, for all of you who are in the field and either working for a pharma, bio, or medical device company, we all know that through the life cycle of a product, safety reporting is key to ensure your product getting to the market and staying there. So you have safety reporting, which is required through your investigational interventional period, where you do interventional clinical trials. And it, of course, once the product is on the market, doesn't stop, then you get into the post-marketing surveillance requirements, which are separate regulations for each pharma, bio, or device company to follow to ensure you do continued safety follow-up ongoingly until actually decommissioning of your product. So how can this be done? Well, preclinical, meaning in the clinical phase where you do your investigations, you have to follow the rigorous regulations under the GCP or ISO 14155 2020 header, depending if you're in pharma, bio, or medical devices, for adverse event reporting. And all the kinds of adverse events, serious adverse events, adverse device or adverse drug reactions, SUSARs, and so on. And that is clearly in the clinical trial regulation and in the also in the medical device regulation for the device part regulated. After post-market, you have other regulations, local regulations to follow to ensure continuous vigilance of safety issues that need to be reported per local regulations to regulatory bodies to ensure, ongoing safety. Because you don't know everything about the safety of a product just through going through a clinical trial, because that period is too short and the number of patients involved is too limited. Now, you have more leeway post-marketing than you have pre-market to collect that data. So post-marketing, you have literature, media, as listed on the slide here, service data, social media, ongoing clinical trials as well. We all have the post-marketing or the registries in devices, or you have the phase 4, either interventional observational trials, customer surveys, or real-world data. And that's keep the last for the best. So real-world data is up and coming. It's more and more getting known, but also getting accepted as a strategy for the continued collection of your safety related information as well, next to other information you still want to have on your product. But safety related information is a way to real world evidence is a way to collect that information as well. So maybe you can go to the next slide. With regards to that, I also do think it's very important to know that that there are different regulations, but that today there are guidances on the collection of real-world data available both by the FDA as by the EMA in Europe. Those guidances are not completely final yet. They're open for feedback, but that shows, next to the fact that real-world data evidence collection in the full life cycle of a product, so also under GCP, is going to be accepted much more and more, because the GCP E6 R3 is up and coming, where it's actually literally written there that is also a way to collect safety-related information, both in a clinical phase as in post-marketing. So I just wanted to, as the queen here, because yeah, I need a T-shirt out that. I want to make sure that you are
the queen.
Yeah, of the regulatory, that you know that there is a regulatory framework available for every situation. So that shouldn't hold anybody back to use real-world data collection for safety-related information as well. That's all I had. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks,
So that is,
Esther.
yeah. So that's actually what I just mentioned then, you know, and these are real life examples of what can be collected. So the term adverse event is used both in a clinical phase of pre-market as post-market, but it's important to understand that pre-market, that is anything that happens to a patient because you don't know yet, you don't know the product enough to know if it's related or not. Post-market, it's always an adverse drug or adverse device effect. It's always, you only report what is suspicion of or has relationship with the product. All the rest you don't need to collect anymore there, because otherwise that would be outside of scope and way too much work. What is interesting is also you can look at all of these adverse, I call it here drug effects as an umbrella term. Yeah, in general, what are in the context of what is happening with this patient, not just as a standalone event, but they're taking this drug. Yeah, what is the context? What is the age group? What is the location? What other concomitant medication are they taking? What is their full medical profile, not just what was in line with the inclusion criteria of a protocol preclinical, which is all way much more narrow. So you can have a full picture of actually how is your product behaving in a real life setting and what safety implications that have. Also, to what extent are people compliant to their treatment schedule? So how are they compliant with the leaflet? Is there any safety-related incident related to the fact that patients are not taking their medication properly? That's a whole different situation than actually having a safety issue directly related to your product. And overall, health-related quality of life, which is ultimately the goal. We want to have products that help people, but at the same time give them a good quality or a balance of good quality of life. And that you can measure through real-world data post-marketing much more than just in a very rigid protocol. Of course, sometimes post-marketing protocols are still needed, or depending on what information you want to achieve, but real-world data can put the reality more into, make it more visible on how products behave, or how the behaviors are of certain patient groups with the use of a certain product. Because a product can be meant for a certain group of patients, but for another intended use, that same product with other dosages can behave in a whole different way in another patient group. So I can go on here forever on all of the multitude of opportunities you have to collect data that is of interest to both you as a company as your patients.
Yeah, and just to perhaps add to that, Esther, so on this slide is really a summary about some of the experience that we've had of implementing safety reporting into the types of studies that we do, the digital studies that we do. And actually, as you know, in our experience, these types of digital tools are quite well adapted for this type of activity, because, as you see at the top there, there's, you know, it's important. We haven't listed a whole load of different requirements, because there is variability depending on which jurisdiction you're in. So we didn't want to be overly specific. But with digital tools, it's relatively straightforward to tailor the type of reporting you have that for perhaps the certain requirements in certain countries might be different from others. So, you know, that's quite a straightforward thing to do. As Esther's taking you through the types of information that can be quite important to capture, and we're doing this directly from patients, and then beyond the data that we're capturing, there's always a discussion with the sponsor in terms of How do we report that? What's the frequency? What's the format of the reporting that the sponsor requires from us? And who receives it? Now, again, from a digital sort of tools perspective, that's relatively straightforward. It's simply a workflow that we have to specify with the client of, or to make sure they're comfortable with all those things. So what the data we're capturing can vary by country, and then how we're reporting that to the sponsor. So if I carry on then to the next slide, it thinks about it. Whoops. I seem to have got a white screen, that's odd.
Yeah, I've seen the same.
Okay, odd. So maybe I'll just start that again. Oops. Here we are, there we are. Let's try again from there. So here's a couple of screenshots actually from the way we've done this.
Start
study.
again.
Oh, sorry.
Oh no,
Yeah,
it's fine.
there.
Just took a moment.
Yeah. Okay, so of course we have to meet regulatory requirements. Of course, linkage for all stakeholders is a real advantage. And as we were saying before, rigorous and targeted, and it can vary depending on the jurisdiction. Something we can do pretty straightforwardly. You see on the right a couple of screenshots from when we've implemented this. Sam will maybe take you through a little bit more detail. If you're doing reporting directly from patients, perhaps with in a sort of BYOD setting, the UI UX considerations are really important. We have to make this as easy, straightforward for participants as we can. So here's a couple of screenshots how we've done that on smartphones that you can see there on the right. So hopefully if I go to the next slide, it won't be a blank one. And yeah, a couple more screenshots for you. So the way, as I said, we think there's some nice advantages to doing this using digital tools. So as hopefully you see, there's nice simple UI UX, which makes things easy for participants. We do this in a device agnostic way. So again, make it really easy for participants. If they want to do it on a smartphone, fine. If they want to do it on a tablet, fine. PC, fine. And hopefully making it not too onerous. So that reporting that it doesn't take them too long and isn't too complicated. Sam, do you want to take us through the rest?
Yeah, can do. So what we've got up on the screen is just an example timeline of a study where the product's moving from pre to post launch during the real world evidence study. So we present this example as something that we have done ourselves in Vitaccess, so we know that these steps are reflective of what could be done and what should be done. So we would typically start the project, kick it off, design the study, initial ethical approvals, launch that study. Quite typically with real world evidence studies, we want to collect data from patients in a variety of different scope countries. Countries where the product pre-launch is being targeted for. So we might want to start collecting that data in preparation for those submissions. We've got here then just at the bottom, just before year 2, is that we would then do an ethics amendment. So this is working on the content for this safety reporting module. So working out the wording of the questions that we're going to be asking participants in the study, thinking about the design of how we're going to capture the safety reporting information from participants. So just to stop there and give an example, we could allow participants, and this is based on something that we have in place at the moment, we could allow participants to spontaneously report safety reporting information by going into a safety page within the app from the main burger menu, where participants could report safety reporting, or sort of in response to participants filling out, say, a bespoke treatments survey question, they could, as part of that, tell us that they're receiving a particular treatment, and that would then trigger them trigger a question that says, you've mentioned this. Is there any safety reporting that you would like to report at this time? And if so, it would take them through the safety reporting procedure. And then just to come back to the timeline. So again, working on that data that feeds into the HTA submissions, we get to a position, you get to a position potentially in the study where then that product is launched. Again, just to come back to that example, again, we could be collecting the safety reporting information pre, target product launch, and it could maybe be, treatment survey information about products already on the market. Say the study sponsor already has some other products that they would like to collect safety reporting information on. When we then come to launch of the new product, the product of interest for the real-world evidence study, the safety reporting module again could be put in place to capture spontaneous or sort of probed safety reporting information about that product in relation to that. Yeah, not much else more to say about that, unless there was anything else, Esther or Mark, that you wanted to jump in on.
I'll just add one thing, maybe, that of course, here today we've been talking a lot about safety reporting. These studies, that's one of the potential usages of these types of studies. So recruiting a cohort early in the development for a study that's related to a particular product is really valuable. So a couple, in this study, in this slide, you see a couple of aspects of these types of studies that we do. HTA submissions, publications, etc. So actually, safety reporting, we think, is a really valuable part of this. Can be a part of one of these longitudinal studies, but it's only one. So plenty of other aspects of these studies can be pretty useful.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that, one of the big advantages of already do a real world study before you go into interventional trial is to already collect some data to help you select the right patients, to help set your in and exclusion criteria, to set the kind of safety reporting that you're looking for in your clinical trial. So it could potentially also help efficiencies in your protocol writing and really tailoring in line with the scientific question you want to answer through your protocol, and ensure more efficiencies and thus have a positive effect on your timelines and your budgets. So I just wanted to add that as well, Mark. Thank you.
Great point. Thanks, Esther.
Amazing. Thanks, Esther. I'm going to have to get that T-shirt made for you, Queen of Compliance.
In gold, with golden letters, please.
Oh, cool. Thank you, everyone. So now we're going to move over to the Q&A session. I've got a few questions here, but if anyone wants to type some extra ones in, then please go ahead. If you don't want to bring it up here, you're also welcome to message us afterwards at info@vitaccess.com. So, first question. Are there any recommendations or considerations pre-launch for design to ensure that post-launch safety can be implemented?
I could say sort of one thing about that, and then I'll maybe ask if Esther has another point. I mean, one thing's always, we have to say, it really depends on the, there's a lot of specificity depending on the indication and for instance, things like treatment patterns. So, establishing causality can be helpful between treatments. So the data capture of treatment pattern information pre-launch can be quite important. So being able to understand, if there's a safety event, which treatment it links to. So as always, there's a lot of flexibility to make changes later, but that can be useful to try and establish, right from the get-go.
Okay.
Esther, anything to add to that about pre-approval considerations?
Yeah, of course. QAing and Rexa, you have to be ensuring that your design is in compliance with the regulatory requirements. That depends on where you are, but for related to safety, it's very important to know your investigator brochure or your leaflet very good, very well to ensure that, that your design is in line, that you capture all of that information, that you don't have, safety information that is going to stay under the radar. And that's why it's so important to do your preparation. So they are not really specific design aspects that are outside of what you're already used to, besides the fact that you just need, it depends on where you are. In an interventional trial, it's carved in stone. But post-marketing, in a real life setting, in a real world setting, you have to make sure that you take into account everything that has an impact on your safety reporting, so that you, underreporting is an issue, but over-reporting is also an issue, that you don't start getting into a situation where you have so much data that you don't see the trees through the woods anymore, and you don't know anymore where we are. So it's very important to understand the therapeutic area, the patient population, the typical disease pattern. Some safety issues can be more related to the actual disease than it has to do with the product. So to filter all of that out as much as possible, so that the data that you do get actually help you learn more about how your product behaves in the real world. So that's the challenge that I see with real world evidence, is that there's so much other factors influencing how a patient reacts, that you have to ensure that we capture the safety related information that potentially is related to the product, but are not overloaded by data that has other root causes. Does that make sense?
And Esther, that's a great point. I'd make a sort of add another point onto that, which is, I think, consistent with it, which is, we as researchers can get really obsessed by the data we're capturing. Now, particularly if you're using a framework in which your participants are providing data away from clinical sites without healthcare professional supervision, it's really important to make sure you test and involve those participants in the study and the data capture you're considering. If you have something that is too onerous, too complicated, too burdensome for the participants, they simply won't do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Really important to build into your launch and your design phases multiple feedback loops with patients, with patient advocacy groups, etc. It does take a bit of time, but in our experience, it's time that's extremely valuable.
Yes, that is indeed a good point. Yes, go ahead, Anna.
So I've got one that's more about a concern about this type of study. So in potentially avoiding this type of study, because it will increase the chances of having events to report. Do you think this is an issue?
No. Well, it goes back to it all depends on the design, because the more poor your design is, and the more clutter you have, and you are not sure if it's a safety issue, and to be sure you're gonna report it, that is indeed a challenge. And that's why I say it's important that you design it very well. And going back to Mark's point, do your due diligence, also that people understand what they need to report, because you say we go directly to patients, and that's a challenge, but I can tell you, and I'm sure people on the line who do research will confirm, and if not, shout out, but it's also a challenge with sites. We have to make it as simple as possible for people, and as clear as possible in lay language. What do we want you to tell us? And easy to do. And if they have to click on 16 buttons, they will not do it. I will not do it. I need one, maximum 2 buttons.
Nice and easy.
Taking all of that into account, I don't see an issue with this, because there is a bigger danger of having underreported safety issues than overreported. And when an actual safety issue does come to surface, which was not known before, then that's actually a good thing, because that's the whole goal why we do this research. And it's better to so they don't stay under the surface and only pop up when it's too late, and when we then discover that there would have been already some key marks or red flags that we could have seen before to ensure patient safety, then that would be a shame. But assessment of an over-reporting and where that reporting, or that unnecessary reporting come from, and ongoing making adjustments to your research is definitely needed. As Mark, and I'm sure you all will agree, is that with Realworld, you set up it in a certain way, but you learn as you go on and you make adjustments as you go along. So even if you do some over-reporting at the beginning, it's just a matter of then adjusting, but not stay there. There, I totally agree. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. I've got another question that's just come up. For a treatment with expected frequent minor adverse events that has become a problem in a much smaller subset, how would the platform query patients in a way that is practical? So not every day, but ensuring significant A patterns are captured appropriately.
I leave that to the tech guys.
I mean, I guess part of that's about the design of the data capture and trying to make sure that you capture enough information so you are able to stratify accordingly across the population. I don't know if that's a sufficiently detailed answer, but I mean, I suppose it's about also trying to understand what your objectives are and trying to think ahead to what the data might look like at the design stage, so that you design it appropriately, use all the data, etc.
And it goes back to what Esther, you were saying, how simply you can do this as well.
Exactly. It's all about, it's so important, the trial preparation and setup phase. Don't rush this. People always think that they gain time. They're always looking for, when do we have that first data in? Having first data in is not so difficult. Having the right first data in requires quite a lot more. So it is a good investment of time and budget spent to do that assessment up front. So, and it's very specific. Your question here is very specific to a certain adverse event. What I know about the platform that Vitaccess uses, there is sufficient leanness in making sure that you can capture this in a good way. But it all needs to be looked at in your preparation phase and in your design related to your specific objectives and in line with the kind of therapeutic area and the kind of audiences you're working with.
Yeah. And just to add, of course, as you know, I've said this before, if you're doing this digitally, or there's almost no excuse for this, because it's far easier to iterate, to adapt, than perhaps people might be familiar with from using traditional tools for this sort of work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I may be a little bit proactive here, but some people say not everybody is as digitally savvy. But we have to make it so accessible that every age or every population can use it. And don't underestimate the elderly folks. I know
Absolutely.
80 years old who are more a nerd like I am on technology. And the ones who are more vulnerable, well, we have to make it so easy for them that is not a hurdle. And you have your patient advocacy groups and everything as well to support with that.
Yeah, and we haven't got time to go into all of that today, but there's a number of aspects of that. I mentioned sort of access, of course, in this type of work is really important. Try and make sure you can get access to as many patients as possible. Essentially, what Esther's saying, you don't rule people out, don't exclude elderly people, etc. But yeah, we've got some lovely examples of participants actually, pretty elderly, but who perform extremely well. And it's almost a badge of honor for them. They can do this. And they're not excluded. It's not just about talking on Skype with their grandchildren. It's participating in this sort of studies.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Yeah, we're moving away from that generational gap now, where we can say that they're not able to use technology in the way they can. So yeah, it's interesting. I'm just aware of time now, so I'm going to do probably one or two more questions. So focus today's been on safety data to regulators post-approval. Could some of this pre-approval data be of interest to regulators?
Yeah, so perhaps I'll say a quick one, then I'll pass over to Esther. I mean, I think this is part of the movement, the tendency of using real-world data in more broad settings. Not, of course, people on this call might be more familiar with that from an HTA perspective, but I think there's guidance from Esther alluded to a few minutes ago of regulators being more and more open to use of real-world evidence for more and more, not just post post-approval settings. Esther, do you want to sort of fill in some gaps there?
No, absolutely. That's exactly why regulators are having these drafts. They see this as this opportunity. They see there is a lot of data out there that is now in the dark for them because it's not even to date, but the guidances are there to get that data visible to them within the regulatory frameworks as in how it is going to be used and presented to them. So absolutely, it is for the regulators very interesting, and also it's all about efficiencies and budgets and timelines. And with the technology that we currently have available to us, there is no need for this real-world data not to be used to make submissions or claims to go or keep your product to the market perfectly valuable and valid for them, and valid meaning that it passes their regulatory requirements. So yes, they definitely are interested in that, to see how this can make the conduct and the cost and the timelines for doing research, which is the highest cost in the product development, more shorter and more affordable. And they're looking at every avenue, but they're putting their toe in there right now in the water through their guidelines, and also to giving more of a framework through the GCP E3 standard. But it gives also a lot of freedom how to do it, because they're moving forward. They move away from checklists, as we already did with the R2 guideline, towards a more risk-based approach. So this can be looked at on a case-by-case basis, where real-world evidence can bring added value as of interventional preclinical trials already. And having all of that data already in that phase can help you be more efficient in the collection of post-marketing data and the setup of your post-marketing safety-related real-world evidence collection, so that you don't duplicate efforts, or you don't overlook potential safety issues. So it's all about efficiencies and timely capture of safety-related issues. And the regulatory framework is definitely already there, and it's growing, and it's coming even more and more. But the interest is absolutely there, and it's not going away. It's going to be even more in the future.
Fab. Thank you, Esther. I'm going to try and squeeze one more question in and ask, have you already implemented safety reporting in this way? Potentially some examples.
Yeah, so maybe I'll just, the short answer is yes. We've done this, and maybe I'll pass over to Sam to give a bit more of an example of, you know, a typical type of study that we've done this in. So yeah, we've deployed the safety reporting module from our platform to do this, and you know that's some of the materials based on our experience from doing that. Sam, do you want to talk a little bit around an example that you've been leading?
Yeah. So I touched on this a little bit earlier, but one, you know, a study that we're working on at the moment is, you know, a post product launch study. Although worth noting that the product is being extended into other countries and age groups, which is where, you know, it comes back to that timeline diagram, where even though we've launched a study in one country and it's you know, post-market for that country, it's actually, you know, pre-launch for the other countries, and so it's very useful to still collect all of that data that feeds in to the pre-launch submissions in that respect. But yeah, in this case, thinking specifically of post-market, we've got the product, we've got specific questions asking about treatments that the participants are receiving, and I sort of mentioned that there was two ways that we could potentially, you know, there's potentially some others, but for this study anyway, you know, two ways that participants could report safety reporting. So one is spontaneously at any point within the study platform. The second is actually then when participants are every 2 months filling out a treatment survey, they're asked again, can you just let us know the current treatments you're receiving? If they indicate a particular type of treatment, it then prompts them to report any safety reporting events that they might want to report. So that sort of comes back, I guess, a little bit to that question that we had in about sort of making sure that we can capture safety reporting, but it's not onerous. You know, we're not. And another question around sort of trying not to overburden participants with the collection of safety reporting data. And I think, yeah, all of that sort of comes back to then what you were saying, Mark, which is to really think about it in the design of the study. So that's what we did on this study. You know, we wanted to make sure that it was tied to a regular survey administration schedule, but also the participants could spontaneously report anything so that nothing was missed. There's always an opportunity for participants to report safety reporting. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Sam. We do have a few more questions, but we have unfortunately run out of time. So I just want to thank all of you, Esther, Mark, and Sam, for being on this webinar. And we hope to join you next time, where we'll be talking about caregiver perspective. So thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.